This conference will now be recorded.
All right, there we go. All right, so personal auto coverage. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Again, don't be scared to jump in if you do have a question, all right? So personal auto policy, I mean, in a lot of your online training or whatever you did your required hours from, or required course, they call it personal auto policy. On the test, you might see it as a PAP. To throw you off, they'll call it an ISO PAP or ISO personal auto policy on the test. And the ISO is Insurance Services Offices. Well, the ISO is where all the insurance companies get their policy forms from. You know, they have their attorneys kind of maybe change some of the language, some of the conditions, and then they file it with the Department of Insurance to use that policy form. And so an ISO PAP is just the same as a PAP. Okay, they just put ISO in front of it to make you think that there's some other new policy out there that you didn't study, and there isn't. Another thing you might see is unendorsed PAP. Now, I mean, hopefully you guys are not to have a lot of test anxiety as yet. And some people do create a lot, but unendorsed just simply means there's no endorsements. You just bought a personal auto policy. Okay, so, but again, I bring this up because I want you to have a heads up so that when you take the test, you know, you're studying personal auto policy this, personal auto policy that, personal auto policy that, personal auto policy this, and then you go take the test and this is under an unendorsed personal auto policy. And if you got anxiety, you're thinking, what the hell is that? We didn't cover that, right? And then it leads you to want to pick something else as an answer. Right? But unendorsed just simply means you bought a personal auto policy. Just take the word out. Unendorsed means there's no endorsements. Okay. And the four coverage parts, I use like a dyslexic lump, LMUP, to help you understand the coverages. And that's going to be L is for liability, M is for medical, U is for uninsured motorists, and P will be for physical damage. Okay. But we'll start with just the liability portion of the policy. Now, even though coverage A is liability, which is bodily injury and property damage, for the test, coverage A, B, and C are kind of all liability because it can pay other parties, other people. Liability is the biggest part of a personal auto policy. It protects you hitting someone and injuring them. Now, I'm using 15, 30, and 5. Those are the minimum liability limits to register a vehicle in California. It's a minimum liability limits that you're required to carry in California. Each state has their own different minimum. You know, Florida has what, 10, 20, and 5. Alaska's got 20, 50, and 10. And so each state's a little bit different, just to give you a heads up. So I'm just using California. And we're using split limits. So the 15, the first number, that's basically 15,000 for bodily injury. That means if you hit someone with your car and they're injured, we pay up to 15,000 towards their medical bills and their lost wages, right? Because maybe they're in the hospital for a couple of days and can't work. And all your policy is going to pay is a 15,000, right? Because that's all you bought. So hopefully you hit a car with just that one person. But if you hit a car with multiple people, we'll pay 15,000 for any one person, but no more than 30,000 for everyone injured in that accident in the other car. Remember, this is liability covering the people in the other car. So no more than 15,000 bodily injury per person, but no more than 30,000 for bodily injury for the occurrence. Okay. And then the third number, the 5, that's 5,000 for property damage. So the first two numbers cover the people in the car that you hit. The third number covers the car that you hit. That's kind of how you want to view that. You want to know what those numbers mean because very often that's a test question. All right, an individual has split limits of 25, 50, and 10, and they mean which of the following. And you need to know it's 25,000 bodily injury per person, 30,000 bodily injury per occurrence, and then the 10 is for the property damage. Okay, and so they'll ask you that, so you got to know that. If Part A, liability, covers the people in the other car, then Part B, medical, covers you and your family and friends in your car. And a lot of people say, I don't need medical. Yeah, I got a great HMO at work. You know, I got a $20 copay where our family's covered. That's awesome for you. But you ever have your friends ride your car with you? And what if they're injured in an accident that you caused? Is your $20 HMO copay at your work going to cover your friend in your car that's injured because of the accident you created? And it's not. And so medical can be applied towards their deductible. Hopefully they have health insurance. The medical can cover their deductible. They can use their health insurance, which reduces the likelihood of your best friend suing you. The medical coverage on your auto and your home helps stave off lawsuits. Okay. Now I'm using a 2,000 limit. You can get as little as 1,000, or actually you can just say, I don't want this coverage. But I'm using 2,000 because that's common that they show on the test. Out in the real world, a lot of the policies that you'll see, most of the agents put 5,000 for medical on the policy. Right? The liability and medical, there's no deductibles. Okay, it pays $1 of any claim. Okay? Just so you know. But medical, I mean, that's 2,000, and that's a per person limit. So if you had a 12-passenger van, right, and you're driving the kids to, maybe a Girl Scout nonprofit organization, and you get into an accident, it's your fault. This will pay $2,000 for each person who's injured in your vehicle. All right, you pay for the medical up to that $2,000, but it's only covering the medical. So if they're in a hospital, it's not going to pay lost wages like the liability would. All right. So coverage C is a liability coverage. It's kind of the main liability coverage that pays you. It's almost like the only liability coverage that pays you because you got injured from someone else. So uninsured motorist, UM, is you got injured by someone else and they don't have insurance. And so this is going to pay for your medical bills, your lost wages because someone hit you and they didn't have insurance. So we use two numbers because it's only covering bodily injury per person, bodily injury per occurrence. We're not covering the car. So always remember that for the test. UM or uninsured motorist, or UIM, which is underinsured motorist, only covers the people. It doesn't cover damage to your car if someone without insurance hits it. We'll get to that in a minute. So underinsured motorists, the UIM, again, you got hit by someone who has insurance. They just don't have enough to take care of your medical. And so your policy can pay the difference between their limits and what it takes to take care of you up to your limits. That's why there's only the two numbers here. Okay. But that's UIM coverage. And you notice it's the same limits as the liability. If I had 100, 300 under coverage A, 100, 350, okay, then I can get 100, 300 under uninsured motorist and UIM coverage, okay? You got to look at it this way. If you hit someone and we're going to pay them $100,000 for their bodily injury, would you want the same $100,000 for you and your family if someone without insurance hit you? And that's why it's typically matching limits for the first two numbers. Okay. If they want to go with lower numbers, maybe, and this is where you'll see a lot of agents try and make the premium look good. They'll give you 100, 300 up here, but they'll keep this at 1530. Okay. That means if you hit someone, we'll pay them 100,000 for their medical, but someone without insurance hits you, we're only going to give you 15,000. I mean, why are you giving a stranger more money than you'd want for you and your own family? And so it should match. But if they don't want this, they can sign off, or they want lower limits than their liability limits. Again, you have to have them sign off. Okay. Now, if this only covers the people, then the uninsured motorist property damage covers damage to your car because someone hit it without insurance. This number will look familiar because the maximum we typically pay is $3,500 for damage to your car from someone who hit it who didn't have insurance. And so if your car is parked on the street in the middle of the night, someone hits it and takes off, okay, that's the maximum we're going to pay to fix your car. All right. In the real world, for this UMPD, we need a picture of the license plate, or we need digits off the license plate. Okay. Otherwise, they might say, well, we're not going to pay because you probably had a collision claim, and now you're just saying someone hit it in the middle of the night. All right. So be wary of that. So if you only have the liability coverages, your UMPD only pays $3,500. Okay. So now let's go into, let's say you have liability coverages and physical damage. All right. So physical damage covers direct physical loss, damage, or destruction to your vehicle. And it's broken down into two parts: collision. And collision is damage to your vehicle because you caused it. You drove into a tree. Okay. Direct physical loss or damage to your vehicle from losses from collision, colliding with a vehicle or object in the road, or upset. Now, when you see upset on your test, that means your car rolled over. You know, you hear stories of people on a long stretch of highway, they fall asleep and they drive off the embankment and roll their car. That's a collision claim, right? Usually it's a higher deductible and your rates are going to go up because it's your fault. And so this is you damage your car because you hit something, it's your fault. That's what that comes into play. Other than collision is damage to your vehicle from losses other than collision or upset. Okay, that means a tree falls on your car, that's other than collision. If you drove into a tree, that's a collision claim. Okay, someone steals your car, that's other than collision. All right. The most common other than collision loss would be windshield chip. Okay, pay a deductible, we replace your windshield. Okay, other than collision, usually a lower deductible and your rates are not going to go up because it's not your fault. All right, so when someone says they have physical damage, they have both of these on the vehicle. All right, so there's no such thing as full coverage. Don't get pulled into that in the real world when you sell insurance. All right. When people say full coverage, it means you have liability coverages and you have physical damage coverage. All right. But I don't like using full coverage because you don't. All right. Do you have trailer coverage? Do you have accidental death and dismemberment coverage added to your auto policy? Well, if you don't, then you don't have full coverage because full coverage implies you have all the coverages associated with that vehicle. So if I had the minimum liability to register the vehicle and I get the physical damage because I do have a lender on the vehicle, a lien holder, right? They got to list it and they want to protect their interest in the vehicle. Okay. If I hit someone with a car and they sue me for $150,000 and I only have $15,000 liability, wait a minute, you told me I had full coverage. Why am I still paying out of my pocket? You see, and they can kind of come after you for that. So rather than dabble with that, you just want to say you bought liability coverage based on the coverage limit you chose, and you have physical damage coverage with these deductibles. All right, so don't say full coverage. Now, if you have physical damage coverage, instead of uninsured motorist property damage paying $3,500 maximum, we now kind of waive your collision deductible. Okay, so if someone without insurance hits your car, damages your car, and you have the collision coverage, the UMPD will actually waive your collision deductible. It's a no-fault collision claim, so your rates aren't going to go up. Okay, that's how that's treated. So now, if you hit an animal while driving down the road, we always say the animal hit you. That means if an object hits you, it's other than collision. Okay, I know people just say, "Oh my God, I hit the dog," and that's a collision claim. But no, in insurance, the claims we chalk it up to the dog hit you. You don't want to swerve and miss a deer because then you'll probably roll your car or hit the cars next to you. Okay, I hate to say it, and that's a collision claim. Remember, higher deductible, your rates are going to go up. If the animal hits you, it's a lower deductible, your rates don't go up. That's the other than collision. Okay, so just so you know. All right, and like I said, you got to know the difference. If you don't have collision coverage, then you have the liability coverages, and you get the uninsured motorist property damage pays a maximum $3,500 to fix your car. But if you have the collision coverage, then the uninsured motorist or UMPD waives your collision deductible. Okay, this is going to be very common on the test. They really don't go this route very often. Okay, in fact, I haven't seen this on the test. It's in your study materials, but I haven't seen this on the test. This is the one they talked about. And you will get coverage on these. There are questions on these, sorry. Yeah. Okay, and this is the unendorsed personal auto policy. Both of these unendorsed. There's no endorsements. Okay, so there's different liability limits that you can get. Okay, again, you can start with the 1530, but I mean, the more that you have as far as personal assets and income earning ability, where you're worth more in a lawsuit, the greater the liability coverage you should probably recommend to your prospects. So 250, 500, that means if we hit someone, we pay up to 250,000 towards their medical bills, right? And lost wages, and up to 500,000 for all the people in the accident, right? And 100,000 for the vehicle you hit. So if you only had, 25, 50, and 10,000 for property damage, if you hit someone's vehicle and you hit a Tesla, which is like a $100,000 car, this wouldn't be enough to fix that Tesla or replace it. Okay, so and you could be paying that for quite some time. All right, and so again, if you're worth more in a lawsuit, then you definitely want to get higher liability limits. Now, with every liability coverage, there's another piece that people don't talk about called supplementary payments. So this is going to pay out if a loss occurs, but what's included is supplementary payments where the insurance company may choose to defend you in a claim against you. At the insurance company's discretion, they may choose to defend you because maybe the case could be frivolous or fraudulent. Right? Or maybe the person's going for more money than they're legally entitled to, and the insurance company's choosing to defend it. That's what that's about. And along with that comes lost wages. If we need you to take some time off from work to help us with this case, we can pay you up to $200 a day lost wages to assist us. You know, take pictures of the accident scene, you know, maybe and blow it up for poster form for the jury when we go to court, whatever it may be. They'll reimburse that. Okay. If they need you to get a bail bond, you get the bond, they'll reimburse you up to a certain amount. And if perchance they lost the case, then you get the appeal bond because you're going to appeal it, take it to the next level. You get the bond and they'll reimburse you. So premium on appeal bonds also. Okay, but it's kind of cool that people don't realize it. Not only are you buying the insurance limits that you chose with the insurance company, if you did hit somebody they sued you, you're also in a sense purchasing the insurance company's legal defense team to defend you in a case against you. Maybe offer a settlement to reduce the claim, defend the claim if it seems fraudulent. Maybe the person that you bumped in a 5-mile-an-hour stop and go traffic is claiming soft tissue damage. They've done this 4 or 5 times in the past. And so this seems like a setup, okay? And they may choose to defend you. Now, the insurance company chooses to defend you. I want to emphasize that, okay? It's not like, hey, you need to defend me. No. The insurance company reviews the evidence, and they choose whether or not to defend you. Okay? So I threw a couple questions in here just to kind of give you some insight as far as what you can expect when you take the test. And again, there's that unendorsed, and you don't even have to read this, okay? Basically, a personal auto policy would cover which of the following under the liability coverage part, okay? So the unendorsed means nothing. The question is asking about liability, and liability covers others, okay? So the repair expenses that are needed to fix the damage to a neighbor's fence that was result the insured negligently driving into it while driving unsafely. So you damaged someone else's property or injured someone else by driving your car. That's liability, covering others. Okay. The rest are not liability. Right? A personal auto policy contains the following limitations: $25,000 per person and $50,000 for bodily injury per accident. I should put a per, sorry. An accident occurs that injures 3 people, resulting in a number of lawsuits. The outcome of the lawsuits found the insured to be liable and responsible for the following damages: $10,000 for the first person, $13,000 for the second person, and $35,000 for the third person. How much will the policy pay? Okay, so there's 3 people, and the first thing we got to look at is the maximum we pay for any one person is $25,000. And so if this is a limit, this is a loss, we pay the lesser of the 2 numbers. So we pay $10,000 for this one because that's less than the 25. We pay $13,000 for this one because that's less than 25. But this one we're only going to pay 25 because that's the limit. So 25 plus 13 plus 10 equals 48,000. 48,000 is less than the 50,000 per occurrence limit. We pay the 48,000. Okay. So you want to go with the lesser of the 2 numbers per person, and then add them up in the lesser of the 2 numbers for the occurrence. That's how you want to calculate it. And if you do get a math question, I mean, this will probably be one other than the co-insurance question you might get. But I got to be honest, even if you hate math, at best 2 to 3 math questions max. Most people only got 1 related to co-insurance. So if you don't like math, don't get bogged down. Don't let that take up a lot of your time worrying about math questions. You didn't fail because you didn't know math if there's only 3 questions. Okay, so it's okay to miss a couple, All right. In most states, it's 70%, 150 question test. You can miss 45 questions and still pass. Okay, so don't get bogged down by, I don't understand this one question. Let it go. Okay, get the other ones right. All right. Some optional coverages associated with your policy is towing and roadside assistance. This is that tow truck that comes by, helps unlock your car, fixes your flat, or tows you to the nearest repair shop. That's what that's about. All right. Labor conducted at the scene of a breakdown or labor conducted at the place of disablement is the language that the test will use. All right. But that's all it is. Now, if you do get into an accident, your car's in the shop. Number one, we might tow it to the shop. But then do you need a rental car? Because if you get rental reimbursement, the standard limit on the test is $20 a day. You can always buy more. All right. But on the test, if someone needs a rental car, it'll pay how much? $20 a day. Okay, that's kind of what it goes with. Now, there's a 24-hour wait. So if you did get into an accident, you got to wait 24 hours before we pay you $20 a day for a rental car. But if someone steals your car, you've got to wait 48 hours for us to start paying the $20 a day for a rental car. Okay. The reason we give you an extra day for theft because a lot of times it turns up. Okay. Sometimes people forget where they parked and they remembered and go get it. And so that's what that's about. Okay. But 40-hour wait before we pay you $20 a day for the rental car. Named non-owned auto is not really an endorsement. It is to some extent, but it's an endorsement that defines that you are buying an auto policy and you don't own a car. Right? So if you have someone who lives in the city, they don't own a car. They borrow their friends' cars or they rent cars if they want to take a long trip or a vacation. This is what it's going to be. It's an auto policy, personal auto policy with a named non-owned auto endorsement, which you can only get the liability coverages. Because if you don't own a car, you cannot insure a car that you don't own. So this is only going to give you the liability coverages, right? Part A, B, and C, when you're using someone else's car or if you rent a car. Because rental car companies don't have insurance. So if you rent a car, your insurance is primary. All right. And this will cover you for liability. Then you can get the physical damage waiver coverage at the rental car place. Now, extended non-owned is you have a car, you have insurance on your car, but you're working for a company, and that company gives you a company car to use for regular use. That means for business, non-business use. Now, if you lend your car to your neighbor, it's your car. So if you lend it to your neighbor occasionally, and your neighbor gets into an accident, your insurance is primary. Always keep in mind, insurance follows the vehicle. So if your neighbor borrows your car to go to the store, occasionally they get into an accident, your insurance pays first because it's your car. Likewise, if you borrow your neighbor's car occasionally to go to the store and you get into an accident, your neighbor's insurance will be primary because it's their car that you borrow. Yours will be secondary. But that's occasional use. But if you have another vehicle that's furnished for your regular use, that's actually excluded by your personal auto policy. And so you're thinking, if I work for a company, they give me a company car, that company has insurance for me to use, right? Well, great. It's awesome. But have you looked at the limits? What if your company only got like 50, 100 in liability? And so you hit someone while going to the grocery store in a company car, they're going to sue the company, but now they're going to sue you for $250,000. Well, your company only got you $50,000. Well, your policy excludes coverage for vehicles furnished for regular use. That means your personal auto policy will not be a backup policy for this unless you buy this endorsement. So we're extending coverage to a vehicle that you don't own, but you use regularly. That's how you want to understand that. Okay. And it's only liability coverages because you cannot insure that vehicle that you don't own. All right. Miscellaneous type vehicle endorsement. This is tricky because there's no such thing as a motorcycle policy. There's no such thing as motorcycle coverage for the test. In the real world, they use it all the time. Hey, you get motorcycle coverage, right? Or you buy motorcycle insurance with us. But it's really, there's no such thing as a motorcycle policy. It is an auto policy with a miscellaneous type vehicle endorsement it helps define that this auto policy is covering a motorcycle or a dune buggy or a golf cart or an RV or an ATV, all-terrain vehicle. And so this endorsement just defines the vehicle that we're covering. And that's how you want to understand that. Okay. Your policy does not cover you in Mexico at all, at all, at all. Okay, keep that in mind. That's one of the questions you may get. But then you get another question. If someone purchases the limited Mexico coverage endorsement, how far will it cover them? And it'll cover them up to 25 miles into Mexico from the U.S. border. Remember, it's 25 miles from the U.S. border, not 25 miles from the Mexico border. There's a little bit of a zone there between the two. Okay, and we'll cover you no more than 25 miles into Mexico from the U.S. border for no more than 10 days. All right, so this is very limited coverage to go into a border town in Mexico. All right, but if you don't have this endorsement, your policy doesn't cover you in Mexico at all. Your personal auto policy covers you anywhere in the U.S. and Canada, okay, and U.S. territories like Guam. But absolutely no coverage in Mexico or Europe or anywhere else. Okay, that's how you want to understand that. Some other items, some states have what's called low-cost auto. I mean, I know we do in California, that's why I put it here. It's a California low-cost auto program. So if someone qualifies, you know, because they meet that poverty level, they're making less than 250% of the federal poverty level, they qualify as a good driver in the household, then they can get a liability policy with 10, 20, and 3 as far as split limits. So it's kind of funny. The minimum liability limits in California are 15, 30, and 5. But if you're low income, you can go with lower limits. But you can only get these low limits. You can't extend it or increase it, okay, because you're low income. And you cannot get physical damage coverage. This is only covering liability, protect people that you hit because you're low income. All right. And then we have the assigned risk program, which a lot of states have. And this is for high-risk drivers. If you have multiple tickets, multiple accidents, DUIs, nobody wants to insure you. But you got to have insurance. And so you apply to the assigned risk program where you can buy a liability policy. Again, it's for high-risk drivers that can't get coverage anywhere else. And again, there's no physical damage coverage. It's only covering liability in case you, a high-risk driver, hit someone and injure them. Okay, so this is where you get people knocking on your agency door saying, hey, do you guys offer a physical damage only policy? Why would they only want physical damage? Well, because they have liability coverage by one of these other programs. Right? That's where that comes into play. Okay. To be honest with you, it's kind of a lottery. Okay. So you're applying for auto insurance, and because you're so high risk, nobody will touch you. You know, 2 DUIs in the past 2 years. You know, a couple tickets or actions, nobody will touch you, but you got to get insurance. And so you apply to these insurance, they reject you. After you get a couple rejections, they go to the assigned risk program, and then you buy a policy. Now, when you buy a policy, you're in a sense, your name goes into a hat with all these other high-risk drivers. And we pass the hat around to all the admitted insurance companies that sell auto insurance in the state. And so the company that you may have applied for originally and got rejected because you're high risk, they might actually pull your name out of this hat, and now they have to insure you with that liability coverage. Okay. You can buy higher limits on the assigned risk program, but not on the low-cost auto. All right. All right, so all the following vehicles are eligible for coverage under a personal auto policy except, all right, and that's a private passenger auto owned by a partnership. So it's a partnership, it's not a personal auto, that's a business. So it gets tricky because it says a private passenger auto, so that can be a personal auto policy, but it's owned by a partnership. So it's not an individual or a married couple, okay? Now, if you're driving on behalf of a nonprofit organization, that's still a personal auto risk exposure, and that's okay. But if you're, you know, renting your car out or using it for food delivery, that's business use, and it's not covered by your personal auto policy. All right. Which of the following coverages is a property insurance coverage? And that's going to be other than collision, because this is liability. Personal injury is liability, and medical payments is paying others typically. It's part of liability coverage. Right? But yeah, and that's actually people, I should say. This is property, so this would be the answer for that. Okay. As far as collision and other than collision coverage, it covers anything that's bolted, welded, nailed, or attached to your vehicle. All right. So like a hood ornament, tools associated with the vehicle, like a spare tire, the tire iron, that would be covered. But if you have a laptop in the back seat, someone breaks the window and steals it, that laptop is not going to be covered by your personal auto policy. That laptop is personal property. That's going to be covered by your homeowner's policy or your renter's policy, which, by the way, there's no such thing as a renter's policy. It's a homeowner's policy that's specifically for a renter called an HO4. Okay. So, yeah, the test they're pretty tricky in that, because it's a renter's policy. Well, no, there's no renter's policy. It's a homeowner's policy that's designed for a renter called an HO4. Okay. All right. So California does have lower financial responsibility limits than most other states. So if Randy, a California personal auto policy insured, carrying minimum liability limits of coverage, if they take a trip and they have an accident in another state that requires higher limits, guess what? Their policy will automatically provide the higher limits while they're visiting that other state for no additional charge. So if you want to tour the country and you get into an accident in another state that has higher liability limits as the minimum requirement, you're automatically provided with those higher limits. Okay, you don't have to do anything, which is kind of cool. As long as it's just a visit. If you relocate to another state, then you typically have to now register the vehicle and get insurance typically within 20 days. So if you're getting mail at that other state, then yeah, you need to register that vehicle at the other state and get the appropriate coverage. Dave has $5,000 in medical expense coverage at the time of a covered accident. Dave and 2 passengers were injured. The medical treatments cost $7,000 for Dave, $4,000 for Sally, and $8,000 for Dale. How much will the policy pay under Part B? Well, Part B medical, he's got $5,000. That's the maximum we pay per person. So we're going to pay $5,000 for Dave max, right? $4,000 because it's the lesser of 2 numbers for Sally, and only $5,000 for Dale, and that equals $14,000. Okay, 5 plus 5 plus the 4. Right? It's always the lesser number. The medical doesn't have a per occurrence limit; it just has a per person limit. But liability has a per person and then a per occurrence, so you have to take a look at that one. A pickup van, pickup truck or van with a gross vehicle weight of 9,500 pounds may be eligible for a personal auto policy if it was used in the business of farming and ranching. Okay, so if you're using your pickup truck in the farming industry because you own a farm, I mean, that's personal use. All right, delivery, claims adjusting, these are business use. Hauling property for a fee, you're making money. That's business use. Share the expense carpool. You're carpooling to work and you're sharing the gas money. That's covered because that's still personal use. All right, but if it's a business where you're generating revenue from it, then that's going to be business use, not covered by your personal auto policy. By the way, personal auto policy covers pickup trucks or vans that have a gross vehicle weight of less than 10,000 pounds. Okay, so if the vehicle weighs more than 10,000 pounds, I should say, if it weighs 10,000 pounds or more, you cannot cover it under personal auto policy. You typically have to move it over to the commercial world. Okay. By the way, 10,000 pounds is equivalent to 5 tons. So you may get a question, says a personal auto policy weighing 5 tons. A vehicle may be covered. Vehicle weighing 5 tons may be covered under a personal auto policy. Kind of a true or false thing, and that would be false because it has to be less than 5 tons. So it has to be less than 10,000 pounds. Okay, so be wary of things like that. Like I said, the test writers are pretty creative. The car is insured using a personal auto policy. The car is damaged by hail. The loss is covered as other than collision. So remember, other than collision, in the real world, we call this comprehensive coverage. Something hit you. So hail hit you. You didn't drive into the hail, so it's not a collision claim. The hail hit you. That's why it's other than collision. All right. Bill has a personal auto policy with a $250 deductible for collision and a $100 deductible for other than collision. He runs a stop sign and hits another car. There's $13,000 worth of damage to his, Bill's car. How much would the insurer pay for the damage to Bill's car? Okay, so it's in the question. He runs a stop sign and hits another car. That means it's his fault. So it's a collision claim. So it's going to be the $1,300 loss minus the $250 collision deductible. And so $1,050 is what it's going to pay. Right? If they change this story up to where, he stops and a tree falls on his car, then it's going to be $1,300 minus the other than collision, $100 deductible. Okay, so what happened? Did he cause the loss, or was it out of his control where something happened to the vehicle? And that's how you want to calculate that, because they might flip-flop it. Right? Which of the following may be covered under the physical damage insuring agreement of a personal auto policy? And the CD player. I know some people still have CD players. So engine failures, mechanical breakdown, which is wear and tear, that's not covered by insurance. CB radios are typically portable. They're more like handheld. It's not bolted, welded, attached to the vehicle like you normally think it would be, so that's not covered. If they put radar detection equipment, that will never be covered, okay? Because a radar detector, typically it's plugged in your cigarette lighter and just suction cupped to the windshield. And so that's not bolted to the vehicle, okay? And so it won't be covered. But yeah, if you install a CD player, and that's covered because it's bolted, welded, nailed, attached to the vehicle. The limited Mexico endorsement applies to trips to Mexico with a duration of, we talked about this, no more than 10 days. Remember, 25 miles into Mexico for no more than 10 days. All of the following expenses are covered in addition to the limits of liability under coverage A of a personal auto policy, except, and so this is saying all of the following are covered in addition to liability. So we're not talking liability coverage. We're talking about that supplementary payments coverage. And it's the supplementary payments coverage covers all of the following except prejudgment interest. Okay, prejudgment interest is actually covered by the liability portion of the policy. So let me explain. Let's say you're an injured party, someone injures you. You file a claim against their insurance company denies the claim. Okay, so you get an attorney or whatever, and you take them to court, and you win the case. That means when you win the case, we can go back and say, well, then they should have paid me back when I filed the claim originally. Because if they paid me then, I could have invested the money and earned interest on it. And so if you had to take it to court and you won, you can request prejudgment interest, which is interest on the payout that they should have paid because they delayed payment until you took them to court. So that's interest that could have been earned on the payout prior to the court order. Okay. And then supplementary payments could actually cover what's called post-judgment interest. So let's say you win the court case, but now the insurance company takes their time in paying you. Okay, that means if they paid you when you won the court case, you could invest that money and earn interest on it, and that's post-judgment interest that could be awarded. So pre-judgment interest is covered by liability. Post-judgment interest is actually covered by supplementary payments. Okay, so, but this is going to stand out. All of them are covered under liability, or they're paid in additional liability except prejudgment. All right, you'll spot it. Under the liability portion of a personal auto policy, notice I don't say this one, right, because it has no relevance. We're talking about liability under a personal auto policy. What coverage is available if the named insured is operating a company car on a regular basis? And your policy doesn't cover you using a company car on a regular basis unless you bought that extended non-owned auto coverage endorsement. Okay, so this says there's no endorsement, so you bought the stock policy, so it's not going to provide that coverage. All right, so that's kind of what I have today. Again, if you haven't registered, consider it, right? Get 60-day access. But at this point in time, open it up. What questions do you guys have? Don't be shy here. If you want, you can text it in or chat it in. Okay, we're all good. All right. Is anyone in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area? Yes, no? Sacramento. Okay. I am having a live cram course on Wednesday. So it's next Wednesday afternoon. It'll be in Pleasanton. So email me if it's something you want to come down from Sacramento to join. It's a 3-hour cram course, and I do have some handouts. I don't give out my questions, but I do hand out some of the charts that I have to help you study. But let me know if you want to join in. It's from 2 to 5 Wednesday afternoon. Okay? So no additional charge for that, just to let you know. But for coming from Sacramento, that's a bit of a commute, so it's your choice. Okay? But let me know if you want to jump in. All right? So with that, thank you, thank you, thank you. Good luck in your studying, and reach out if you do have any questions. All right? Thank you for taking time out of your